All right, welcome back to the Elias Macco Show. We are in the midst of a housing crisis. People keep telling me when we talk about housing crisis, we need more social housing. I keep hearing it. I don't know if it's true, but I keep hearing it, right? And out this week, we have a story about the Habitation Chester building on Walkley Avenue in NDG. Now, it was evacuated for repairs in 2013. 11 years later, the social housing building remains vacant. There is no clear plan in sight for its future. I have heard now, though, can't just be repaired. It has to be demolished. They need to start from scratch. And the other thing is that, the Auditor General of Montreal has said that 24,000 people are on a waiting list for social housing. So what are we doing here when we can't even provide upkeep on the buildings that we have? Let's talk to the opposition at City Hall. From Ensemble Montreal, we find ourselves with Julien Henault-Ratelle on the line. He's the spokesperson on housing for Ensemble Montreal. Julien, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me.
So tell me, from your perspective, what has gone wrong here over the last 11 years?
Well, sadly, we're just facing another failure from the Projet Montréal administration in term of housing, and it's not quite surprising when we're taking a look at the buildings that are owned by the OMHM. We have those kind of issues all across Montreal. In case of the Walkley building, we could have housed at least 11 families in this building, and it's quite terrible. When you take a look at the numbers, you've been talking about the 24,000 across Montreal. Just in Côte-des-Neiges and Abdelraz, there's a waiting list of about 2,500 people waiting to get a social housing unit. So at least that could have been helpful, but. Beyond all of the numbers that we're telling right now, the most important thing is that Montrealers are currently suffering from the lack of leadership from the Plante administration in terms of housing.
So when you talk to the Plante administration or you talk to the people at Montreal's Public Housing Office, the OMHM, exactly, they say, well, this is a budget issue. There's not enough money from the province. There's not enough money from the federal government. This is the issue. Do you buy that?
Well, no. It's true that we're having a lack of investment from the Quebec government in terms of social housing for the reparations and for the new construction. That being said, 3 years ago, back in 2021, the federal and provincial government made an agreement with the City of Montreal. It was an agreement over 3 years with $94 million to repair some of the HLM owned by the OMHM. And in the first year of the agreement, so in 2022, the OMHM spent only $15 million out of the $94 million. And that, for me, is quite an issue because we have the case of Walkley. We have the cases like that across Montreal. And when they finally get money from Quebec and Canadian government, well, what we're seeing is that they take a lot of time to spend it and to make the repairs that have been waited for a long time by Montrealers. So yeah, it's a fact that we're missing some investment from the other governments, but when the city receives some, they don't spend it, and that's another problem.
So, why is that? And I look at other budget issues, and people rightfully point out, if you look at the City of Montreal's budget, right? Obviously, policing, huge number, right? We spend a lot of money on police, but that every city does, and that's a big part of the budget. Then you go down the list, and then I look at the numbers between how much the Projet Montréal administration is spending on bike paths. And by the way, I'm a proponent of bike paths and bike lanes. I think we need that infrastructure. But I look at the dollar signs in the midst of a housing crisis on bike lanes, bike paths versus housing. It doesn't make sense to me. So I just like how are they getting away with that in a housing crisis to spend so little, to focus so little on it?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, and I mean the case of Camillien Hood would be another great example of trying to spend tens of millions of dollars on some project when we're facing a huge crisis. The housing crisis that we're facing in Montreal is one of the worst in decades in the city, and the city have some responsibilities in terms of improving all of the buildings owned by the OMHM. I mean, we've been talking about the one on Wall Street. We've seen in the media in the past few weeks and months other cases in Rivière-des-Prairies, Pointe-aux-Trembles, where people are living with mold, pest infestations, and even some citizens having respiratory health issues because of the conditions in which they are living. And when we take a look at the overall portrait across Montreal, we see that we have over 1,500 units that are currently vacant, owned by the OMHM because of the lack of reparation. The buildings are being deteriorated, and now it's not suitable anymore. So
who's in charge? Julien, I got to ask,
yep.
Who's in charge of that? Doesn't a head need to roll? Doesn't someone need to be fired? When you have units that are there, they can't be used because they're in such disrepair for so long. Is there any accountability?
Well, we need to review the governance at least. And I mean, when we're facing such an important crisis, I think that it's the role of the mayor of Montreal to go in hands and try to improve the situation. And what we're seeing right now is really the plant administration not taking its responsibilities in term of housing. And year after year, what we're seeing is that the situation is getting worse. You know, in the last report of the Auditor General, we've seen that about 80% of the social housing buildings that we have in Montreal are either in poor or very poor conditions. And just within 1 year, between 2022 and 2023, the situation got worse by about 16%. So we see a huge acceleration of the deterioration of the buildings. And I think that, as I was saying, in such a huge and important crisis, that should be the priority number one of the plant administration, and that's sadly not what we're seeing right now.
Next year is an election year in this city.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, let me make you mayor, right? I don't know if you've got those aspirations, but we don't know who's going to lead Ensemble Montreal. But let me make you mayor right now. You're mayor, day one. What do you do on this dossier?
Well, basically, specifically on social housing, I think that, as I was saying, we need to increase the speed of the reparation in the social housing buildings that we have, since we already have some money given by the Quebec and federal government. So that's one thing for social housing. We've been discussing it before, but I think that overall on the housing issue, we need also to put aside the 2020 that is basically reducing a lot all of the construction start that we have across Montreal. Developers are telling it to us. They prefer to go either to Laval, to Longueuil, in other cities in Quebec. So that's a huge issue that we also need to face. And I think one last important step that the city could make is to reduce all of the bureaucracy and increase the speed of issuing the construction permits. And I mean, we've seen again in the past few weeks the time that it can take in few boroughs. In mine, in Mercier-Hochelaga-Maisonneuve, it can take up to 600 days to receive a construction permit from the city of Montreal. And it's outrageous as well. Julien,
I got to run. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks to you. Always a pleasure.
Julien Henault-Ratelle is opposition councillor for Ensemble Montreal, official spokesperson on housing matters.